Okay, thanks for having me out there in Westgate land. So I really appreciate everybody showing up today, and my intention today is to talk about an interesting set of wines that we have from different vineyards that I've been working with for about 15 years for each one of these wines. And it's a wine that we call Embankment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a bunch of slides as we go through this. I am recording it, and I'll make sure that Westgate gets the YouTube link. We are currently live on Facebook as well. And Mike, you do not have your camera on, which is fine. But I'm going to jump over and, oh, there you are. Mike, maybe you should turn your camera off, actually. So I'm just going to launch straight into this, and I'm going to skip. I've got a bunch of slides here, but it just really depends on how my brain works. But if you guys have any questions or you want to interrupt, please feel free to do so. So there are actually 5 wines under the Embankment. I'm going to only touch briefly on the blended red wine, which is a Bordeaux blend between Merlot and Cabernet. But primarily, we're going to talk about the Chardonnay and the 3 reds. So firstly, who I am and what Embankment means. I am not from North Dakota, or I am from New Zealand, but I came to California in 1990, and I was a corporate winemaker for 25 years. LVMH, Constellation. I was at Simi Winery for 15 years as winemaker. But today I'm actually on my own. I consult in 5 countries. We own vineyards in 4 countries. And I live in a town called Healdsburg. For those who don't know where it is, we are 1 hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge, especially when there's very little traffic, is what we're experiencing right now. But that's all about to change tomorrow because California, well, Sonoma County is opening up. Where these vineyards came from the corporate environment. As things change, these large corporations tend to get rid of small producers. And so I've become a home for small producing vineyards. And so we've collected 3 vineyards, and they go under this label that we call Embankment. So we make, and obviously I don't want to put everything under my own label because I have different vineyards for that. So it's important that we keep these young growers going. It's just like we keep small restaurants or small independents and people like Westgate going, because these are important to the future and make up the cloth of what we're all about, especially in wines. We call if you look on the back label, that wines are produced by 5 gold hands. So I have 5 children. In fact, I can show you a photo. This is a photo that, can you see that? Yes, no? I can't hear you, Mike. Yes? So this is a photo actually we took 2 days ago. So my son is a winemaker, and we have 3 daughters, and I make wines with my 3 daughters, and I have another son who's also in the wine business. But here's a funnier shot. Whoops, sorry, I deleted that. So this was taken a couple of minutes later. As you can see, this is what really goes on in our house. A couple of boyfriends, well, this one's a husband, but we've got 5 dogs as well, so fully matched up. So, yeah. So we don't need to go too much into my history, but basically the Embankment means a lot of the properties in the early days were set up based upon the property lines, and so that's one meaning of it, like the embankment between the two. And often we deal with the Russian River and Dry Creek rivers, and so the banks are really important to us. And I started making a wine in New Zealand called Stock Banks. So we used to build banks to keep the animals out as well. So that was another reason for the name. So that's where it comes from. The vineyards that we're talking about, the main vineyard that we're talking about is this vineyard here, which is very close to Simi Winery. So where I'm sitting right now is this blue dot. I live where that red dot is, and this is Highway 101 heading north. This is the beautiful town of Healdsburg, about 9,500 people. If you come off Healdsburg, you proceed up here, you'll see this little road called Pasalakwa Road. You wind on your way down here. And this area here, it's a really interesting valley because it's everyone married into the Pasalakwas. The Sagacios, the Foppianos, the Mazzonis, and the Petrocellis, they all married in. So there was a huge valley and it's now been broken up. So this piece that we work with here is one Passalacqua family. This is another Passalacqua family, another Passalacqua family. This is actually Pete Sagacio's house. So this is Pete's property here. So we're right next door to Pete Sagacio. That's the only property that Pete kept when he sold. So this is the Cabernet Vineyard we're going to be tasting. This is the Merlot Vineyard. And believe it or not, this is the Chardonnay Vineyard in the Russian River. So when they drew the appellation lines, believe it or not, this is one of the few vineyards in California where there's a dual appellation running through the same property, and pretty prestigious. So we're very lucky to be able to deal with that. The Zinfandel Vineyard is a bit different though. It comes from a little bit further north. As you head up 101, you end up in a town called Geyserville, which is a population of 1,500. This is the town here. And the vineyard that we actually own is this one here. Firstly, looking at the Chardonnay, this is a drone shot. It's a very old block of Chardonnay, and you can see there's a couple of misses here. This is the Russian River. And the key thing about the Chardonnay is that we work with mass selection. So this is a really old vineyard. So this was planted in the early 80s, and we were using old rootstocks back then. And so we often talk about old vine Zinfandel, Cabernet sometimes, but never we talk about old vine Chardonnay. But this is an old vine Chardonnay. So planted in 75. The thing today is that all the Chardonnays that you taste tend to have, you know, white peach and pip fruit. If I see another bloody white peach Chardonnay, I'll toss it out, you know, because today all the Chardonnay's made of clones. The definition of a clone is you know who your mother is, man. You can track everything back to one plant. So there's not a lot of variability. So when you typically see a clone of Chardonnay, it's either from UC Davis or Dijon, which is the French clones, you get these big, long, cylindrical clusters. All the berries are the same size, and they all taste the same. And even if it's clone 75 or 96 or whatever, they all taste the same. They're all in the same camp. But this vineyard is on an old gold-rich sandy loam, so the phylloxera that destroyed all the vineyards in 89 and 90 didn't touch these vineyards because there's very little organic matter. So the phylloxera can't live. Yep, Mike's holding it up. I've got it here right now too, mate. If I have time, I'll open it. My goal is to make these Chardonnays with native yeast is a big deal for me. We use partial concrete ferment. I've been fermenting in concrete since my first vintage was 1982, believe it or not. I've been making wine longer than some of you clowns out there. So then we used to make wine 100% in concrete. It wasn't until I came to the US did I actually see what a barrel was. Pretty funny. And we do very limited malolactic as well, which I hope you can see as well. And the video's not going to play. All right, well, anyway, this is the key thing. So the gold-rich sandy loam is that it's a talcum powder soil. So that's why the phylloxera can't live in it. The other thing that makes this a mass selection or field selection, not a clone, is you get big berries and small berries in the same cluster. And then, of course, the vine, as I said, is really old. You can see some of these old cuts in the vine that have been there for years. And it's amazing that these vineyards still exist. Looking at the vineyard itself, so you can see that we've got pretty open canopy. So what happened was the clonal development really began back in, as I said, in 1989. But the key thing was we had these mass selections, and the mass selections produced all these different flavors. And when we went to clones, what they were selected for was they really wanted to have larger berries, larger yield, and the thing was they wanted to gather the sugar a lot quicker. So with bigger yields, it's harder to get the vines right, but they really wanted to get that to happen, and that's why they selected clonally for things that were going to collect the wine. Increase the sugar much quicker with a heavier crop and earlier in the season, because during the 80s especially, 80s were really tough. Some of the worst vintages we had were 80s, 81, 82, 83, 88 and 89 were all bad vintages in the 80s. And so one of the criteria for selecting clones was that they would accumulate sugar so they wouldn't run into the rain at the end of the season. The other thing that upsets a lot of winemakers is this discussion about malolactic. People go, oh, you know, how much ml is in your wine, trying to understand how much buttery character that you get in the wine, but that really is not. It's not really that important. It's just, you know, do you like it or not? Because there's so many things that go into affecting how much a wine is buttery. I can give you a wine, you know, and just so you know, it's a bacterial ferment. So yeast ferments sugar to alcohol, and then bacteria ferment malic acid to lactic acid. It's not Jack in a Box. This bacteria is safe. You can drink it. So it depends. If you're in a cool climate, you're going to get more buttery character if you go all the way. If you leave it on the lees and do all the surly aging, you're going to get less buttery character because the leaves absorb the butter. What temperature do you ferment it at? When you add the bacteria, if you add it during primary ferment, the yeast eat all the butter. It's so complicated, it's not even worth worrying about. So if you like it, great. And if you don't, you know, we'll find something else. There's plenty of other Chardonnays out there. All right, jumping into the, has everyone got a glass? Are we allowed to taste? Who's got a glass of Chardonnay? Westgate Wines. You can come off mute and tell me what you think. Somebody's raised their hand, Lisa and Steve. Maybe, Lisa and Steve, could you put it in the Q&A and then the team over at Westgate can see it? Is that possible? I'll come off sharing for a minute.
Delicious. They don't normally like Chardonnay. Good
Delicious.
job.
Who wrote that? Oh, it's delicious. Thanks, Lisa and Steve. We don't normally like Chardonnay. Well, that's the interesting thing. There's two things. Merlot is still like the '1 white wine in the US, you know. Even during recessions, I hate to tell you this, man, people drink more Chardonnay. And the other interesting variety is Merlot. Oh, I don't normally drink Merlot. I don't like Merlot. Guess what? It's the #1 red in the world. Everyone drinks Merlot. You just don't know you're drinking it. So whenever you drink a red blend, you're drinking goddamn Merlot. And you don't drink Syrah. That's the other thing that normally goes into a red blend. So don't ever think, oh, I don't. And remember, Pomerol is all Merlot. I mean, you telling me if somebody gave you a bottle of Petrus right now, you wouldn't drink it because it's Merlot? I don't know. Just my little shtick. Anyway, the other thing that I do with a Chardonnay is, you know, there's two things. I like to have two glasses. And the second thing is, I want wine to wake me up. So when I was making wine in Portugal back in the 80s, 1982, right? I'm a young gringo. I didn't know anything about Portuguese wine. I'm over there. They want me to make red wine out of Touriga Nacional. So I go over there. I'm hanging out with these 3 Portuguese winemakers. We had a winery called Roses. It's pretty well known. Anyway, the reason why people are skinny in Portugal is not because the economy sucks. It's because the food is really hard to eat. And they eat these things called barnacles. They're about this long, right? You got to get a skewer, and you need 3 of them for a mouthful. All right? And you're drinking port, and it's 110 degrees. So you're sitting outside, 3 Portuguese winemakers, it's lunch, it's 110 degrees, I'm eating barnacles and I'm drinking port. Anyway, the young lady walks by and I said, ma'am, could I get a glass of white wine? Immediately the winemakers go, Nick, we don't make white wine in Portugal. The young lady goes, don't worry, I'll take care of it. She comes back, she fills a glass up like my mother, right, up to here. Condensation's pouring off, it's 110, I'm drinking port, and got these Portuguese winemakers. I get this wine and I chug it. And my whole mouth goes, all the enamel on my teeth is gone, the roof of my mouth is gone, my palate is just disintegrated. I'm like, what the shit was that? But the interesting thing was, after a couple of seconds of realization about what I'd just done, I was thinking, am I hungry or thirsty? And that's the sensation that I want to get in here. So the way we trick it is by not using all that wood. No wood, no good. No, it's a distraction. You want to make it bright. You want to make, I mean, it's a fruit, man. This is a fruit. We're drinking fruit. We're not drinking wood. We're not drinking alcohol. We're not drinking acid, man. Anyway, my little thing. So the second thing we do is I put a little Sauvignon Blanc technique into the wine. When you drink Sauvignon Blanc, we fake it. We fake the acid by adding a little bit of CO2, carbon dioxide. You know that stuff you can't get ripe, you call champagne, right? So that was funny too. Nobody laughed. Okay, got it. So I put a little bit more CO2 in this, and so it gives that little wake-up call without being acidic. Anyway, somebody doesn't drink charts because they're too oaky, but I got the idea. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think too many Chardonnays are too woody and too sweet. And I think especially with Cabernet, and we can talk about it a little bit later if we've got time. All right, I'm going to jump back on sharing, and let's see if we can. So this is a look at the vineyard that you saw earlier. So this is the Cabernet. Here, this is the Merlot. Down here, we have two parts to the Merlot. So this block of Merlot here, where the rows are a bit shorter, that's where we make the Merlot from. And these longer rows, believe it or not, they go into what we make the red blend out of. So the red blend is a blend of Merlot and Cabernet. There's no Syrah, there's no Zin, there's no other stuff. And then, as I said, the Chardonnay comes from across the other side of the river. Oh, sorry, the other side of the property. The key thing about Merlot, which will be the first red wine that we talk about, is that it has this really good water holding capacity. Because the key thing with Merlot, if you compare a Merlot berry with a Cabernet berry, Merlot weighs about 1.2 grams and Cabernet weighs 0.95 grams. Well, that difference, my Wi-Fi just went unstable. Hope you can hear me. The difference in size. So if you run out of water on Merlot, you dehydrate the berry. And if you dehydrate a big berry like Merlot, all you're doing is concentrating sugar, acid, and tannin. And so you get alcohol and astringency, and that's not what we want. So the latest red grape ripening variety is a variety called Cabernet. For those who haven't tried Cabernet, get on down to Westgate and get a bottle of Chilean Cabernet. It's really a unique variety. It's very green, very spicy, but the texture is amazing. Anyway, we learned a lot of things about growing Cabernet over the years, and one of the things is that we really want to be on a clay soil. So the clay soils, so you saw earlier I was holding up talcum powder for the Chardonnay, but for Merlot we want to have a little bit more clay because the clay holds a little bit more water, and that's really important as we have these long seasons to get through. So we really want to maintain the berry turgor. So for those who don't drink Merlot, this is a Cabernet drinker's Merlot, all right? So we keep the berry whole all the way through to ripening, and then when I bring it into the winery, I extract the hell out of it. So it's a Cabernet drinker's Merlot, and that's where that comes from.
Embankment Cabernet is what you see on the hill back there, and in front of me is the Embankment Merlot. And these vines are planted pre-1990, so before the phylloxera devastation of 1990, and they got the traditional wired trellis, just a 2-wire trellis. And being so old, the vines sort of had this natural way to get into balance. And the other cool thing is we have this beautiful sandy loam soil, so really good water holding capacity. We don't have a lot of water out here in this part of the Alexander Valley. You can also see that it's organic, and that we've got plenty of weeds is what you see in organic vineyards. And the flavors are fantastic. In fact, we'll be picking this tomorrow. A lot of black plum, black cherry, and blueberry flavors, so I'm really excited, and the tannins are super soft. So Embankment Merlot is going to be another great vintage, and really looking forward to it. Beautiful day, lovely wine, awesome.
Yeah, it's hard to see, or it's hard to visualize unless you understand, but basically those vineyards, a lot of vineyards, and including the Zinfandel, these vineyards were grown on a head prune system. So they're grown on the old traditional system. And a head prune means that the canopy just comes over and naturally shades the fruit. Now, remember, these vineyards were planted before we had invented irrigation. And with the invention of irrigation, it means that we can keep the canopy in good condition for longer. So these days we put a couple of wires in there and try and bring the canopy up a little bit, so to expose the fruit and allow good airflow through the canopy to prevent humidity, because the last thing we want to have is botrytis or anything like that. So yeah. So who's drinking Merlot? All right, some of you have got it. I can't hear anyone. What's going on? I'm like in a vacuum. Do I need to tell a sheep joke or something? What do you call an Australian with 2 girlfriends? A shepherd.
So Nick, do you make any wines that aren't vegan?
Do I make any wines, sorry?
That aren't vegan?
That are vegan? All my wines are vegan. We don't use this one really, and it's become really interesting because my son is vegan. And yeah, he lived in he like came back all weird, you know, when he was living in Spain. He was a winemaker at he worked for, you know, some little winery called Campo Viejo, you know, I don't know, you might have heard of it. But after the vintage, he went and lived on this like really weird Spanish place. I don't know. Anyway, so I've always wanted to make wines vegan, but now I'm actually eating vegan as well. So yeah, no, we don't use any animal products at all. It's even the glue. Believe it or not, a lot of glue has animal products in it. We don't even use that sort of glue on our label either. So that was hard for us to do, but I felt that it was important for what we do. The other thing I do is, you'll notice even on the cork, we changed the cork to well, the one I've got is the Chardonnay. So cork is not very sustainable. Even though we call it sustainable, it's a natural product, it's actually not that sustainable. So we've got a different sort of cork in here too, and it's a lot more environmentally friendly as well. And all of our, so the other cool thing is New Zealand in 2000 was the first country to create a sustainability regulation. And you can see what sustainability means. If you go on the New Zealand Wineries website, it's an 80-page document. So anytime you can't go to sleep, give a bit of a read. The second place that created a sustainability program was in Chile, and the third place is in Sonoma County. And we're now at 90% of all vineyards in Sonoma County are registered sustainable, and we think by 2021 it'll be 100%. So this is really important for me. Organics, as you know that, yes, somebody's asking about white eggs, etc., isinglass, which is a fish, it's a sturgeon fish, that's correct. Those things are all make the wine non-vegan. And I used to love using egg whites and actually milk, but we don't use any of those things anymore. We actually don't do any fining at all. In fact, we do very little filtration. The only wine that I actually filter now is the Zinfandel. Everything else is, and there's a lot of reasons for, trust me, you want me to ferment Zinfandel. But organics is, so that last vineyard that you saw is organic. But I'm not a big fan of organics, even though my second degree is in organics and biodynamics. Back in New Zealand in 1982, 83, I was doing organics and biodynamics, but I could talk all day about it. It's not that great for the environment. However, I will say that I'm very anti-herbicides. Herbicides are the worst thing for the environment. So weed killers. So you'll notice in our vineyards that we have a lot of weeds, and so we are now farming. I didn't put the video up, but we're now farming with mechanical weed removers rather than using any sprays. You know the number one user of herbicides? The city council. The cities are using herbicides everywhere on kids' playgrounds and in parks. Do you know the number two? The number 2 user of herbicides? You guys, home gardeners. Number 3, golf courses and rail yards. Number 5, farmers. People think farmers use herbicides. No, you clowns at home use way more herbicides than we do. It's crazy. You're out of control. Stop using Roundup. You know, in New Zealand, when they first came out with Roundup, they called it a plow in a can. That's how strong that stuff was.
Wow.
Someone suggested I'd grow grapes in North Carolina. Talk about weeds. Yeah, not those sort of weeds, dude. All right, we've got a couple of other questions. Yeah, the Merlot is great. You should try growing grapes. No, I'm not coming to North Carolina. It's too humid out there, man. I left New Zealand. It was too humid. Yay, Cabernet Franc. What about Cabernet Franc? By the way, we're all in presentation mode only. Yeah, you have to send me Q&A or get a hold of Westgate. They can send the questions over to me. So I appreciate you asking me. Cab Franc. I consult a lot. You know, I consult for 26 wineries around the world, and everyone's in the Cab Franc. And it's a really interesting variety. I always tell everyone it's my second favorite variety. And people go, what's your favorite variety? I go, all the others. The problem with Cabernet Franc is if you tried real Cabernet Franc, trust me, you wouldn't like it. Because Cabernet Franc is like Cabernet. It's very green, it's very spicy. So the first thing you got to do is remove half the crop. You put half the crop on the ground. And that's very hard for viticulturalists to do that these days because land is expensive, farming is expensive, labor is expensive, fuel's expensive, fertilizers, they're not going to do it. So it's very hard to get them to do it. Secondly, you can't leave it on skins like we do with Cabernet and maybe Merlot or etc. Because the skins become very dry very early. So what we do with, believe it or not, the best Cabernet Francs that I'm involved in, we actually barrel ferment them like a Chardonnay. So we take them off the skins, we put the wine directly in the barrel and we ferment in the barrel. There's a risk involved in that, but it actually, I think it makes the Cabernet Franc taste softer and more integrated. Even though I say I'm like not a big Cab Franc fan, I'm actually planting Cab Franc on one of my vineyards right now, just to sort of appease some of my Cab Franc lovers. I'm not sure how I'm going to use that wine yet, but we'll figure that out later on. But yeah, Cabernet Francs, there's a reason why Carmenere was eliminated as a Bordeaux varietal, because that was the 6th Bordeaux varietal, and Cabernet Franc remains the 5th. The most interesting Bordeaux varietal, though, I mean, all of them are really unique, but Petit Verdot is killer. And the quality of Petit Verdot that we're getting these days from the plant material that we've got is exceptional. Malbec is a little bit random. Obviously, I was still a big fan of Argentina. And Cabernet Franc is the second big new red that's coming out of Argentina as well. There's not that much Cab Franc planted in California yet, but it is increasing. The other varietal that I'm making is sort of out of the box, which is Carignan. I'm a huge fan of Carignan. And we have a vineyard just north of here that's 120 years old, and it's dry farmed, and I'm making Carignan from there. So that's the other cool red that I'm working on. Any other questions, or we jump back into the red blend?
Red blends.
Red blend. All right.
Let's do it.
So I do put a touch, like a tiny little touch of Petit Verdot of my own vineyard, and a touch of the Cabernet Franc. So I did lie. So what I do is the Merlot and Cabernet, though, make up 85% of the blend. So most of what you're drinking is the Merlot and Cab. And then I put a little bit of Petit and Cab Franc. So those two varietals make up about 15%, but the Cabernet Franc is usually about 10%. And then when we're putting the wines together, there's a reason for it, you know. So Merlot gives the sweetness and the ripeness. Cabernet gives the power and the length, and Cab Franc gives the structure. I just got to keep the creaminess under control. And then the Petit Verdot, which is my favorite, because it's got good color and much blacker than the other varietals. And overall, we use Cabernet winemaking basically for the making of that. Another chat question. Where can we get the Carignan? Oh man, you're going to have to send me an email. Got my email address there, nick@goldschmidtvineyards.com. It's very, very limited. And we're just cranking it. All right, let's jump into Cabernet, which is obviously the main shtick or the main wine that we make. And so there's a lot of things that are important to me. I pick it a little bit earlier. I cane prune it, which I can go into if you're interested. But basically what I'm doing is if you lay down a 1-year-old, I didn't leave the video up on this one, I took it out, but if you lay down a 1-year-old cane, you get one bud, and you have good separation between the shoots. If you stir prune, you get two buds,
Yes,
two buds, and it's much more congestion. And when you do spur pruning like that, you have old wood and you get your type and a lot of dead arm diseases. So I want to move away from that. I also think it's better quality, but that's my opinion. 3 weeks on skins. We use site-specific winemaking. So what I'm doing is I break the vineyard up into 3 pieces, and then based on the vigor of the vineyard, yeah.
Embankment Cabernet Sauvignon Pick Day tomorrow. Look at that view. This is why the Embankment Cabernet is so unique and so special. Well, let's check out a cluster or two. So this vineyard was planted in 1989. Loose clusters, nice even ripening, 2.5 ton an acre. Canopy's in perfect condition for the harvest. East facing slope, so no afternoon burn from the afternoon slope, if you can imagine that. So anyway, should be awesome. Embankment 2019 Alexander Valley Cabernet, beautiful.
So I'm going to jump off here. I'm just actually I'm gonna let's see if I can. I think.
G'day, Nick Goldschmidt here. I'm sitting here with 3 glass.
What I'm.
Complexity out of a single vineyard.
Oh.
Or working.
All right, let's stop sharing it. I'm just gonna draw you a chart of real basic stuff. So if you've got any, I know Mike's like, oh shit, Nick, stay off.
No, Nick, I love these. Are great. These are great, guys.
All right, so I'm gonna.
You've got a question. How do you determine the ideal picking day?
How do I determine the ideal pick date? Okay, perfect timing. It's exactly what I'm going to show you. All right, so on the whiteboard flip chart, yes, it is the same winery as Catherine Goldschmidt, but it's a different vineyard for that person that's asking that question. Okay, so looking up here, so this is the way grapes ripen, right? So if this is flowering, which we've actually just finished, we're just heading into set now, which is the second stage, and this is harvest. What happens is we get an increase in acidity. So this is acid. This is, starting at basically set. So we have a lot of you don't want to eat those little things because they're very acidic. At this point in time, this is what we call veraison. This is when the berries change color. They become translucent. If it's Chardonnay, they become black if it's a red grape. Here we get an increase in Brix. And Brix is a measure of soluble solids, which means it's what converts to alcohol. So it's a metric term for those that don't know, but this is why Americans keep screwing up on the alcohol, because they don't understand it's a metric term. Who cares? We can measure that, but the two things we can't measure, which are really important, is flavor. So flavor starts off low and increases as we get closer to harvest, and tannins move from green to dusty to dry to ripe. And where these three things meet in Bordeaux is 100 days. All right? This never happens. If this happened, then you wouldn't need clowns like me, winemakers, running into the vineyard and making picking decisions. So what happens is, if you have a heavy crop, like 2018 or 2013, the tannins take longer to ripen relative to the tannin, and in a low crop, flavor takes longer to ripen relative to tannin. And in California, in Napa Valley, we can hit about 125 days. In the Alexander Valley, we can hit 145 days. And the way we determine it is, if you go on my YouTube channel, you can see me do this, but the way we determine it is, if this is a berry, you put the berry in your mouth, and under the skin are these vacuoles, and in these vacuoles are tannin and other polyphenolic material. We spit the skin out, we spit the pulp out, and then we chew the skin, and then we spit the skin out, and then we spit again, and I'm looking at the color. And so what I'm doing is I'm determining flavor and tannin. The other thing is, if you want to make a wine at 12 alcohol, I'll just wait for the sugar to get me to 12 alcohol, which might be here. So you can imagine the flavor and tannin are not ripe. So on your tongue, the alcohol which sits here is not high, but because you've got unripe flavor and too much tannin, the wine will finish short and the wine will actually taste alcoholic. Or if you wait for too much sugar, if you wait for too much sugar, the sugar will go up as the berries dehydrate, and on the tongue, you'll get a lot of alcohol, and again, the wine will finish short. So the key for a winemaker is to figure out whereabouts we want to harvest. Does that make sense? Any chat questions so far? I don't know, I'm not monitoring the chat.
All good.
Big
They
speaking
don't
to yourself.
They don't want to see us.
What's that?
They only want to see you. They don't want to see us. So if y'all don't want to see us, you can hover over the video, and where it says gallery view, you can change it to speaker view.
Correct. Or I can just delete you if you want. Hang on a minute. I need a glass of red. All right. Remember back, I flipped over the very first chart, but what we saw was the very first photo of the vineyard. So what we saw on the Cabernet vineyard is we have the rows like this, and we had big green vines here, and we had less green vines here, and even smaller green vines here. And this was the hardest thing for me to understand, is the canopy, where we had the big green vines, the canopy here was very big and the crop was very low. And I would go and I'd go to the vineyard and I green, dusty, dry, raisin. I missed it. And so that's when I started being much more focused on this area here, where the canopy was much bigger than the crop, because the vines were very big, and what happens was they take water from the ground, and then when they ran out of water, they just take it from the berry, and that was what was dehydrating. And the canopy was so big, it would change the characteristic of that fruit very quickly. And this is what we call the dense wines. The powerful wines are sort of where the canopy is in balance. And there's a question on why the red blend is a bit more peppery, and that's purely because of the Cabernet Franc. It's the Cabernet Franc that gives the pepper. And then the elegant wine is where the canopy is smaller than the crop load. So it's overcropped. So what we have to do is remove crop to keep the canopy in balance. And so when I bring these wines into the winery, I ferment them very differently. And if we were to, let me see, how can I show you guys this? If we were to think about mouthfeel, so let's say this is your tongue. So what happened was, very early on in my career, when I was a winemaker at Simi, I mean, when was the last time you guys drank a really good bottle of New Zealand Cabernet? That would be like never, because we don't make good red wines. And somebody asked, what's the red blend? It's 85% Cabernet and Merlot and 15% Franc and Petit, of which the Franc makes up about 10%. So on the tongue, the elegant wines appear on front of the tongue, the powerful wines appear on the front of the middle of the tongue, and the dense wines appear in the back of the tongue. And so what happened was, when I walked into Simi, it was 1986 blend, which luckily was a great vintage. And I spent 3 months putting this damn blend together because, you know, I'm a Kiwi. I didn't know anything about Cabernet, and it was a $75 bottle of wine. So after, luckily I worked for a very famous lady. Her name was Zelma Long. For those who don't know Zelma Long, incredible. You can Google her. She's an incredible lady. And she invited me to work with Michel Rolland, who has since become a really good friend. And he taught me there's only one way to make wine, and that's to sort wines into families. So we took all the soft, fruity wines, elegant wines, we put them together, all the powerful wines, all the dense wines. Then we chose the best of the elegant, made a blend, best of the powerful, made a blend, best of the dense, made a blend. Then we had 3 wines. I made the 1987 in about an hour, and I was already at the pub. And it was better than the 86, which is crazy. So I use that today, but because I'm an engineer, I have to rethink this. So I started going, well, you know, the elegant wines all come from the same part of the vineyard. So why don't I start making those wines differently? And so that's what we did. So if you go in a vineyard and you go, well, how do these taste different? I'll see if this chart means anything to you. I like this chart because it explains everything. I know it looks really cool, eh? So in a elegant vineyard, when I go out and eat the berries that are elegant, the fruit is always in way more concentration than the tannin. So the fruit is higher concentration than the tannin. The powerful vineyards, the fruit and the tannin are in the same balance. And in a dense vineyard, the tannin is always higher concentration than the fruit. So we don't want this distance to be very far apart. And this was the thing I didn't understand. And so that's why we started picking this stuff earlier. So we picked this at 125 days. This is 135 days. And this at 145 days. Because we knew that the fruit was always going to blow the tannins out of the water. So when we come into the winery, this is a tank. You got the seeds, you got the cap, and you got the wine. We use pump over, pulse air, punch down, whatever you want. Because the most important part of the tank is this piece here, because this is where the yeast hang out. They hang out with the skins and the liquid, and this is where they party, because there's a lot of alcohol, a lot of nutrients, etc. So we mix the tank up all the time. So in an elegant vineyard, I ferment at 30 Celsius. For those who aren't up with the rest of the world, you add 15 and double. That gives you Fahrenheit, that the rest of the other imperialistic nations of the world use, like the British. The British and Americans. I hope there's no British listening. Then we give more air, more pump over, and then during maceration, after the fermentation's finished, we let the tank cool down to 18 Celsius. On a dense vineyard, if I made wine like this, you wouldn't be able to drink it. So what we do is we ferment at 22 Celsius, less air, less pump over, and then after fermentation, I warm the tank up to 26 to 28. And what I'm doing is speeding up the polymerization. Okay, I'm not going to go there. But basically, how can I explain polymerization? Well, you know how wines move from purple to red to brown to orange, okay? I don't like brown or orange wines. I only drink purple or red. I don't drink brown or orange. And the key element is this thing. Oh, I will spell it for you. I'm going to spell you the word polymerization of tannin. Somebody asked me, and it's a really good question. So I'm going to explain it. I'm going to give you a little chemistry question here. You remember back to your science classes? Remember flavanols and your Melvin 3 glucosides, which are your carbohydrates? You guys remember that? So this is what you drink. This is what you drink in red wine. It's called an anthocyanin. This is a Melvin 3 glucoside. This is purple. And you guys must remember this. I'm going to give you, this is how you impress your kids, right? You go home and you show them this stuff, and they suddenly realize that you know what you're talking about, right? Okay, you remember these benzene rings? That's what they are. And what's really cool is you have these hydroxyl ions, these OH elements. OH plus OH gives you an H2O and frees up an oxygen. And that oxygen forms here, and then we create another anthocyanin. All right? So anthocyanins are purple. Purple. If you provide heat, light, air, and time, that anthocyanin joins onto another anthocyanin, that's a tannin, and that's red. If you provide more heat, light, air, and time, that compound gets bigger and bigger. Crusty shit. You don't want that. Unless it's the year of your wedding, the year of your birth, the year your child first got married or born, get rid of it. It's not going anywhere. Because with crusty stuff, you're actually pulling fruit out of the bottle as well. Crazy, eh? Anyway. something to dwell on over the weekend. Drink as much wine as you can over the weekend to determine whether your wines are brown or orange, and get rid of them. Take them over to your friend's place. Send them back to Westgate. Anyway, so that's about wine aging. Sorry to bore you with a bit of chemistry, but somebody did ask. They did open up the door for me. Oh, somebody likes the chemistry. There are some real plant biologists out here. We're getting it. Wow, okay. I love plant biology. You know, plant physiology was like my strongest subject, actually. I love plant physiology. That's why I got in organics and botany. You know, I was going to grow garlic. I was going to be a row cropper. But I couldn't make alcohol out of garlic. It wasn't very interesting. I had to find something I could make alcohol out of. Anyway, let's go back to sharing the screen. And I'm going to show you this little quick video that I tried to interrupt myself on. Should start.
The wines to the way the vines best exemplify themselves. So when I was young, I walked into a room once at a pretty well-known winery with 200 wines on the table. I'm wondering, how am I going to blend 200 wines? I came from New Zealand, I didn't know anything about Cabernet. And so working with a consultant, we figured out the best way to do this is to put them into families. Elegant wines, which are the soft berry fruit wines right up on front of the tongue, the powerful wines which provide the fleshiness and the richness, and the dense wines which give us structure and power. So when we go ahead and line all those wines up, I sorted all the
Sorry, that was me.
Sorted all the elegant wines together, and I chose the best elegant wines and made a blend. I got the best powerful wines and made a blend, the best dense wines and made a blend, and we had 3 wines, all from the same vineyard, all from maybe in the same block or not the same block, but all from the same vineyard. And then we made a blend of these 3 wines, and it was the most complex wine that we could possibly make. So today I continue that process. With elegant wines, we can extract them a little bit more aggressively because we know that the tannins are in a lower concentration than the fruit, so we can extract more tannin. Whereas on a dense wine, if we made wine like that, they become too dry and too tannic. So we lower the extraction and try and make the wines more fruit forward. So if I was to drink an elegant wine, I'm going to get more red cherry, great structure, very forward in the mouth, very, very elegant, very ripe, but good acidity, red fruit, and very forward in the mouth. The powerful wine, I can immediately get it. It's more black cherry, a little bit of walnut. And the mouth is really rich, really full, powerful. Not a lot going on in the front of the mouth, not a lot going on in the structural part of the mouth either. And then the dense wines, much more chocolate, a lot more black cherry, but all finished, very supple tannins, good structure, good acidity. And so when we put the 3 together, hopefully, and it's never 30-30-30, because in a warm vintage, I probably want a little bit more of the dense component, whereas in a cool vintage, I want more of the elegant component. So it really depends on the vintage. And when I put all 3 together, we get the most complex wine we possibly can from the same vineyard. And that's how we make single vineyard wines really complex.
Yeah, so on that, I don't know if you understand, but making a wine from one vineyard is more difficult, but it's more consistent. I mean, cheating is using 5 different vineyards from the Alexander Valley and making a blend, or using 4 different varieties like I did with the red blend. That's cheating. To make a complex wine or make it stylistic. But to try and make consistently high quality from one property, which is what we do with the Merlot and the Cabernet and the Zinfandel, it's much more tricky. So, yeah. All right, the Zinfandel, for those who are brave enough to try the Zinfandel, this is America through and through, right? Because this is American grape. And I love Zinfandel. I love the basis of Zinfandel, but I'm not a big fan of high alcohol. And I really feel it. You know, too many Zinfandels are really ripe. And and I think I'm going to draw you one more chart. I don't normally draw this one, but let me just, I've only got a limited amount of time left, but I just want to, this is the thing that bothers me about Napa Valley Cabernet. This is why you shouldn't drink Napa Cab in some instances, because when ferments happen, let's see if I can draw it here. So sugar, okay, does this. There's two forms of sugar. There's sucrose and fructose. I don't know what you guys call it. Fructose or we call it fructose. I can't remember what you guys call it. So glucose is easy to ferment. The yeast ferments sucrose and goes to, I'm going to get myself confused now. We ferment glucose and fructose. So glucose, they ferment glucose very easily, but the fructose is much harder to ferment. And they don't start, and it starts off relatively low, but it's harder to ferment. Now, the problem is that when yeast start producing alcohol does this. And around about 14 alcohol, the yeast start to kill themselves because they're producing too much alcohol. They start to die. So the population does that. And when the population of the Saccharomyces that are fermenting the alcohol start to die, the last bit of sugar that's left is always the fructose or the fructose. And this sugar is really sweet. And so this is why you end up with they're called stuck ferments. And I always smell it, and I often smell it in Zinfandel, and it puts me off. And in Napa Valley Cabernets. And I hate to name the Napa Valley Cabernets because you guys will get pissed off about who I name. But it's the same thing. Do not drink Cabernet at 15 alcohol. It is not Cabernet. There is no variety. I can make Cabernet, trust me, I've done this. I can make Cabernet in Chile, I can make it in Australia, I can make it in Argentina, I can make it in Alexander Valley, I can make it in If I line them all up at 15 alcohol, you cannot tell the difference. There is no relativity when you start producing wines without alcohol. And you end up with all this fructose. This is the Coca-Cola. This is the problem of high alcohol wines. And Zinfandel is a real problem with it because we don't know, because when we pick Zin, we get a lot of raisins. I mean, that's part of what Zinfandel is. So we have to be very careful and having the right soil, and for me, the right rootstock. And that's what I'm alluding to, is making sure that we get the right balance and the right freshness, because I love Zinfandel, but we have to make it correct. And yeah, this vineyard is incredible. I hate to tell you that I make this wine under 2 labels. I didn't submit the Embankment, but this wine just got 94 under another label. So it's a really damn good wine that you're drinking. The 2017 Zin, right? Yeah, because that's what I'm drinking. I'm drinking the 17 Zin. Sorry, guys, I jumped right into it because I love this wine. Let's go back to sharing. So yeah, it's a gentle east facing. We don't know what Zinfandel it is. It's a very, very old. It's planted by a family called the Pratties back in the 70s, and I spoke to the old man Pratty before he passed away. He passed away about 5 years ago, so he doesn't know where he got the budwood from. But it's grown on St. George, which is one of the original Italian rootstocks that were planted, and so we're really lucky. It's not really resistant to phylloxera, but it's got really deep roots, and so it can survive with very little water. And in the winery, man, you got to be super gentle with Zinfandel. You do not want to treat it like Cabernet. You got to be really, really gentle, because the skins of Zinfandel are very friable and they break apart very easily. So we're very careful about that. Yeah.
Out there checking out the Embankment Zin. Beautiful day to be doing that. This is the Railyard Vineyard. That's Cabernet Pick. Railyard is out here in the Alexander Valley, named for 2 reasons. Down the back end there's a couple of railway lines, and also it's the name of a famous rugby stadium in New Zealand. Checking out Zin here. This is a really cool vine because it's planted on St. George rootstock, which is the original rootstock that the Italians used, and the material that was grafted on top, my understanding is it came from an old grower called Pratty. And we're not quite sure of the origin of the Zin, but it tastes pretty damn good. For those who've had the Embankment Zin, you'll know what I'm talking about. So this year we've got great even color, nice round berries, and not too much dehydration. In fact, it's quite unusual to have Zinfandel not showing too much raisinning, although you can see there's a couple of raisins in there. But yeah, not a bad looking vintage. Anyway, Railyard Zin for the Embankment label. Beautiful vineyard, beautiful wine. Hope you get a chance to enjoy it.
so those are the labels. So just wrapping up, the Chardonnay we're currently out there with is 2017. The Merlot, the red blend, and the Zinfandel are 2017. The Cabernet, we're just moving into the 2018, believe it or not. It seems to be a hugely popular wine, so we released it a little bit early because I don't want to run out of stock when we're going through this pandemic. Everything is one vintage, one vineyard, one variety, and they're all vegan. These are real places. I mean, you can come out and see these vineyards, and I really encourage you to do that. And I'll leave you my email address right at the end. But if you get a chance to come out, the best time to come and visit us, believe it or not, is September, October, which is harvest time. But if you come out in the mornings, all I do is drive around vineyards, and you'd be more than welcome to drive around with me. I've been working here since 1990. I think it's really funny that the Wine Enthusiast came out with a magazine that said the 40 best winemakers under 40 years old. They're exactly the wines I don't want to drink. I want them to come out with the 50 best winemakers over 50, because when Kim Jong-un drops a nuclear bomb on California and we all run to the bunker, what wine are you going to take to the bunker? I'm going to take a wine from a guy I know is going to age with no crusty shit. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Because when I'm going to be down there for a long time, I want to be drinking a lot of wine. It better be damn good. Yeah, so I really appreciate you guys coming out. These are my contacts. I'll post this on the Goldschmidt Vineyards YouTube. You can follow me on Goldschmidt Vineyards Facebook, Instagram, and I don't do much on Twitter, but yeah, I'm around. And these are my contacts. This is nick@goldschmidtvineyards.com. That's my cell phone number, and please feel free to call me at any time. So, any questions? We've got a few chats going. What's going on, you guys at Westgate? You're just sitting there drinking? You're not actually like keeping charge on what's going on? Oh yeah, you're all toasting now.
They're all enjoying you.
Yeah, right. All right, what do we got? You guys got the Zin? Yeah, I got the Zin. Oh, Krish, you got the Zin? I don't know.
No, we don't have the Zin yet. We're working on it. We'll pre-sell it. It'll be offered to
Zin? We're excited. Oh, you don't have the Zin? Oh my God! 1, 2, 3. You've only got 4 wines. You don't have the 5th wine. There you go. That's your problem. Yeah, the Chard.
I'm not doing my job, Nick.
Merlot, we're all great. Yeah, okay. Trust me. The Zinfandel, sweet as, baby, sweet as. The Embankment wines have good legs. What do we attribute legs to? Wow, there you go. That's I find it it's a really funny question. I never think about that question, but people ask about legs all the time. So for those who don't know, when you swirl it, the stuff that
What?
Basically that's glycerol.
Pardon?
Legs on the glass. When you swirl the glass, you get some legs. Look at that. There's not many legs on the Zin. That's fantastic. I don't like the legs. I want to have it very uncomplicated, because glycerol is a fakeness of sugar. It really doesn't mean viscosity or quality. There's no definition of quality between legs and quality. I would love to make a pure Petit Verdot. I actually do make a pure Petit Verdot, but it's in Chile. It's under a brand called Santa Rita. It's called Bougainville. It's a fantastic Petit Verdot who wants to do that. And I do, yes. For what I do is I have a little wine club, but it's all tiny volume stuff, like 200 cases, 200 cases, 200. So we will be making a small amount of Petit Verdot under that. But really, to keep me alive, to do that stuff, I need you to be drinking Embankment. Because without Embankment, I can't screw around with other varieties. So I really appreciate you guys supporting Westgate. And yeah, they have my other brands too, like Catherine Goldschmidt, which is super important, and Chelsea Merlot and Hillary, etc. So great. They've been great supporters of ours for a long, long time. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks for doing this.
Any other questions? We're got 2 minutes to go. And
can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you too much, Mike.
Okay. Thank you. I couldn't tell. Thanks for doing this, Chris, everyone at Westgate, and Nick. Man, I appreciate all your support. And Nick rocks, as you know.
Yay, we have
a great weekend.
We have a question. Bye, Mike. We have a question.
Bye, Mike. Okay, I'll mute Mike because you've got a question.
I'm going to mute me.
All right, sure. Thank you.
Nick, my question is, the Embankment blend, red blend, how similar is that to Fidelity?
Completely different, because Fidelity comes from a different vineyard. So Fidelity is a vineyard about 10 minutes away from this vineyard. So it's on the corner of Geysers and Red Winery Road, actually where the fires came through, for those that saw the fires that we had in 2019. Yeah, 19. Yeah. No, 2000. Oh, shoot. I've got so many fires, I can't remember. Anyway, it's about 10 minutes away. So it's a completely different blend. In the Fidelity blend, I'm reducing the amount of Cabernet Franc. I'm moving it over to Malbec. But with the Embankment, I'm going to leave the Cabernet Franc in for about another 4 or 5 years anyway.
Thank you.
I actually prefer the Embankment. I don't know. The Fidelity is a different style. Fidelity is flesh and rich and like a sweeter tannin feel, because the Malbec, a little bit of Malbec's like adding, and Malbec is more of a red, like a purple fruit, like blueberries and red cherries, whereas the Embankment's going to be a little bit more on the higher end red fruit, a little bit more red spice, which is classic. Like, people go to me, oh, when do you drink Alexander Valley and when do you drink Napa? Very easy answer. I drink Alexander Valley Reds with food, because Alexander Valley Reds are more red fruit, they got higher acidity. And then I drink my Napa wines with the cheese. I'm a big cheese guy. So I always drink my Napas after dinner, because then my palate's tired and heavy. And I'll drink my Napas because it's more black fruit, higher pH, fleshier, potentially higher alcohol. So I tend to drink my Alexander Valleys with food, and then my Napa Valleys after dinner. Cool. All right, guys, any other questions? Otherwise, North Carolina, we love you guys.
Thanks, Nick. We love you.
Yeah, thanks, Westgate. Thanks, Mike. You guys rock. And get a hold of Westgate. I'm going to, when I finish here, I'm going to turn this off, and I'll shoot them over the link to YouTube, and you'll be able to watch it again at your leisure. So thanks again. Appreciate the support.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank
Be
you.
good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, guys.